Welcome to the Solid Waste Forum for the town of Amherst. My name is John Root. I'm the chairperson of the Recycling Refuse Management Committee. And we're going to begin the forum with Susan Waite, who's the recycling coordinator, town of Amherst, giving us an overview of the current state of waste removal in Amherst.
Thank you, John. Thank you for coming out tonight. I realize that solid waste is not a super popular topic, and there are other meetings tonight that are going on that people have great passion about. I happen to have great passion about trash, and so do some of my colleagues, and we're really happy that some of you have equal passions about it. So the overview of what we're going to present tonight is that I'm going to present a kind of state of the union of what trash is like in Amherst right now, and present to you some of the challenges that Amherst is faced with at this point. And then we're going to turn it over to talk about some potential solutions for some of the challenges, and then we'll have a Q&A. So first I'd like to give you a brief historical overview of what's trash in Amherst. The most important things are that the site of what is known as the old landfill started getting used as a public dumping ground sometime in the 1930s. It was officially the town dump. It became a sanitary landfill facility in 1970, subject to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health rules and regulations. And in 1983, in anticipation of the old landfill reaching capacity, we opened a new landfill across the street, essentially. And the old landfill was then closed in 1986, and in 1987, the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund was established. And that is a non-tax generated fund that essentially supplies, from which all of the solid waste services are provided. That was started in 1987. In 1991, the state of Massachusetts started initiating state waste bans, which are things that are banned from incineration and landfill. And in 2003, the Transfer Station Recycling Center opened, and the new landfill was capped in 2004. So that's just kind of a general overview. Solid waste in Amherst is governed by the Board of Health's regulations for refuse collection and mandatory recycling. Essentially, it governs haulers, property owners, and talks about penalties, etc., for non-compliance. And essentially, every residential, commercial, and multifamily property owner, manager, or tenant needs to contract with a private licensed hauler for weekly trash removal, exclude from trash items banned from landfill disposal. Some of those items include recycled paper and mixed containers, recyclable mixed containers. And they also need to be responsible for disposal of hazardous waste and other items requiring special disposal. There is an alternative, because we have the transfer station, there is an alternative for people who produce small quantities of trash or have driveway accessibility issues or have some alternate arrangements that are documented. And if they can bring their trash to the transfer station, they are allowed to apply for what we call a variance. Essentially, they prepay for bags and are allowed to bring their own trash and recycling to the transfer station. In fiscal year 2011, 574 variances were issued. Funding. The Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, as I mentioned, operates from a self-sustaining enterprise system with no general tax support. With income from the fund, the transfer station is operated and maintained. Municipal trash is collected from public buildings, and materials are hauled to landfills and collection sites. Public education and information are provided, waste reduction programs are administered, and 2 capped municipal landfills are maintained. We have a total of, it's a full-time equivalent total of 4 employees. We have 2 part-time employees and 3 full-time employees who make all this happen. Collection is done by private waste haulers who are licensed by the health department to collect residential and commercial trash. The Department of Public Works collects trash and recycling from school buildings and some municipal buildings. And then the transfer station serves as a temporary collection site for municipal, residential, and commercial waste. A little bit more about the transfer station. We're nearing our 10th year of operation, and we're open 3 days a week. You probably know all this. Annual vehicle stickers are available to residents of Amherst, Shutesbury, Pelham, and businesses and contractors doing businesses in those communities. We sold 2,200 transfer station stickers in fiscal year 2011. The transfer station collects household and construction waste. We collect items banned from the state waste ban, according to the state waste ban. And then we also collect other things such as clothing, printer cartridges, packing pellets for reuse or recycling. The state waste bans that I mentioned were started, I think, in the 1990s. And they've slowly added to them. So we have a whole bunch of things that we need to separate out from municipal trash. Things like leaves and yard waste, cathode ray tubes, or the large, those old television monitors and the older computer monitors with the big heavy piece in back, mostly because of the leaded glass used in the picture tubes. So there's a whole bunch of things that we need to be separating out, and all of those have a cost associated with separating them. Either we need to find a special organization to come and remove them from the transfer station for special processing, or it's the distance they need to be hauled. There's all sorts of things, but there are costs associated with that. The transfer station also has a take it or leave it shed, which is a kind of a swap shop, a book shed. We have a paint program where we collect paint, and we also have paint for reuse for organizations that would like to have paint. We have a hazardous household waste disposal collection and a Christmas tree disposal. So there's lots of different things that happen at the transfer station. As for what happens to the trash in Amherst, transfer station trash is taken to landfills in Northampton and South Hadley. The household recyclables that are collected at the transfer station are taken to the materials recycling facility in West Springfield, Massachusetts, which is owned by the Commonwealth and is operated by Waste Management Recycles America. Transfer station waste band materials are taken to various locations as appropriate. For instance, we have our electronics go to electronics recycling in Gardner, Massachusetts, and they take care of the disassembly, etc. Private haulers dispose of collected material at their own discretion. It becomes their property when they pick it up, and they are able to take it where they see fit. The same goes for area colleges and universities. They can dispose of collected material at their own discretion. And sludge from the wastewater treatment plant is taken to various incineration facilities in the eastern part of the state. So here are some of the changes that we are faced with, or have been faced with, in the last 10 years. It became clear as I was doing research that we really have changed from a lucrative landfill operation in a grant-funded environment to a transfer station in a kind of poorly funded environment. So there have been a lot of changes. Our new landfill stopped receiving income in the form of tipping fees in 2004. As I mentioned with the state waste band, there have been additional unfunded state mandates requiring us to separate different material at the transfer station. And the state grants and initiatives have been reduced over the last 10 years. There was a period in the early part of the century where we were receiving, through a Massachusetts Recycling Incentive Program, we were receiving tens of thousands of dollars over a period of about 5 years. And those kinds of programs are gone. The bottle bill originally had money funneled into a fund that would make money available to municipalities to help them with recycling costs, and that was taken away by a governor somewhere along the way. So there's just a lot less funding. The funds that are available tend to be very targeted now. The Department of Environmental Protection has certain projects that they are promoting, and they want people to, they will fund municipalities who are willing to take on these projects. So if you're not able to take on that project, the money is really not there for you. We have the type and volume of trash has changed over the last 50 years. In the 1960s, I think 0.4% of municipal trash was plastic. It's increased something like 2,000-fold. It's now something like 14% of the trash. The problem that presents is that plastic has volume but not weight. So it means more trucks are needed to take it to wherever it's going. It means, which means increased fuel, increased labor expense, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a whole issue that has arisen in addition to the increasing cost of fuel. There's also the monitoring and maintenance expenses for our 2 capped landfills. There is a positive light in the world, in the world of solid waste right now, and that is the advent of some extended producer responsibility legislation or a movement. And essentially what that is the requesting that, or not requesting, it's making manufacturers and retailers more responsible for the waste that the products that they're making money off of are generating. It's a really exciting concept because they are the ones making the money off of it. Municipalities are happy because we have been left holding the waste disposal expense bag most of the time. So it's much further along in Europe where they have greater waste disposal concerns, but it's happening here, and there are companies that are even jumping the gun, so to speak, and accepting responsibility before they're required to. We have Best Buy and Staples both have programs where they will accept used computers from people, whether they purchase them there or not, and for a small fee. So it's a really great movement that's happening, and hopefully that will offset some of the expenses in the future, but we're not there yet. So we're presented with a couple challenges because of change being one of the things we can't control. The first is that the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund income stream isn't sufficient to support the existing system and maintain a healthy reserve fund. The transfer station has operated with a negative cash flow for about 3 years, and fund reserves are running out. So that's one of our big challenges. The next big challenge is that the regional landfills to which trash taken from the transfer station, to which trash collected is now taken, are going to be closing within the next 4 years. Northampton is anticipated to close their landfill by fall of 2012. South Hadley within 2 to 4 years, although they have applied for an extension. And the latest that I've heard is that Granby, the landfill in Granby, Massachusetts, which is owned and operated by Waste Management, will probably be closing in about 2012. That hasn't been substantiated, but that is hearsay. So we have a couple challenges in Amherst, and we need to address them, and that's why the Recycling Committee felt that it was important to make this known to people and to talk about what kind of solutions there might be and hear the public's feedback. So I'm just going to present a couple potential solutions for the transfer station situation and the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund income situation. So, and by all means, these are not the only solutions, these are some solutions. The first is that to keep the status quo. In order to do that, we would need to determine a way to make the transfer station financially viable via either fee increases or cost or service reductions, or both. In this situation, we would still need to determine what to do with waste collected at the transfer station because of the closure of the landfills. Another possible solution would be to close the transfer station. This is not a popular solution, but it is a potential solution. We would determine where trash is taken from the municipal buildings would be taken. We would identify options for residents who currently rely on the transfer station. And we would determine if changes to the existing curbside system are appropriate. So that's a second option. A third option, and again this would not be a popular option, is to reopen the new landfill. There is potential for expansion at the new landfill, although it would require quite a bit of permitting, including the Department of Environmental Protection, the Amherst Board of Health, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. That would help us have a place to put our own trash and would provide an income stream via tipping fees from other people, from other organizations. Finally, the fourth solution would be to find some kind of an innovative solution where either that would generate income to support the transfer station and other services, or and/or would be a way to handle the trash generated at the transfer station. There are some really exciting, innovative trash technologies that exist, but there are risk factors associated with them. And most of them would require a lot more waste than what we generate at the transfer station, which would open a whole nother can of worms because it would mean people bringing additional waste to the Amherst area. Several solutions of the nature of generating funds for the transfers, for the solid waste fund by using land and using the property where the landfills are now have been attempted but have not been successful thus far. We have tried to have a cell tower placed on one of the landfills, and there's the current solar array proposal that is on the board. So those types of things would also help provide funding to provide services. So at this point, I think we have, we're going to be introducing some of the other Recycling and Refuse Management Committee members who will be presenting some solutions or options for what to do with the trash that's generated in Amherst. There are a few different solutions, and they're going to take care of that.
Thank you, Susan, for that excellent presentation. And the first member of our committee to come up and join us will be Brenda Kennedy, and she will be addressing landfills as a means of disposal.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Susan. I'm going to talk about landfills as a general concept and not particularly related to Amherst. So by design, a landfill is essentially a double-lined garbage bag that is buried in the ground. So I'm going to talk about some of the benefits and challenges to that. So a benefit is a potential for methane capture. And by the very nature of the landfill, the trash that is decomposing is creating methane. And there's a process that can turn this into electricity, and there's a lot of issues associated with that, a lot of regulatory hurdles and pricey, but that is out there. Landfills are also a revenue stream, and the tipping fees that Susan talked about are paid by commercial haulers, so that can be a way to generate the revenue through a landfill. And lastly, one of the benefits is that it's a large holding place. It can hold a whole lot of trash. It's contained, it's lined, and when it closes, it gets capped. But there's always, risks associated with that. Looking at some of the challenges that exist, looking at the monitoring cost. So long after the landfill closes and stops generating revenue, there are still costs that are associated with that through the monitoring, and that can go on for 20 years plus. Looking at, again, the methane that is produced, it suffices to say that it's one of the most polluting greenhouse gases, and a landfill does produce this, and so that is something that does need to be dealt with. Last but not least, actually we'll talk about the contamination risks, so that a liner can deteriorate, it can puncture, and leach into groundwater. So there's risks associated with that. Lastly, the site location issues. A couple things around that. It's hard to find neighborhoods that want a landfill in their backyard. And most importantly for Amherst, it's critical to think about, if we were to choose this option of going with another landfill, is the hauling. Where are we going to take our trash? That at this point, landfills are becoming more and more remote. This is increasing the carbon footprint of this hauling, and the hauling is happening further and further away. And some hauling is happening as far as upper state New York and beyond. So serious issues to look at.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay.
Next, Sue Morello, talking about strategies of waste reduction.
So waste reduction, zero waste, is it's the idea that year by year we reduce the amount of waste that's generated until we're basically at zero. I have zero waste in the heading here because that's a term that we're going to be hearing more and more. It's in the most recent Department of Environmental Protection's master plan. So there's many pieces that are needed to make this be successful. Enhanced recycling means more types of materials collected and more recycling bins in both public and private places that are readily available for all. Enhanced composting could mean curbside pickup to neighborhood sites to backyard composting. There will be additional waste bans. Possible ones are commercial and industrial food waste, carpet and asphalt shingles. Extended producer responsibility, EPR, that's another term that we'll all be hearing more about. This is producers having to plan for and pay for their discarded products at the end of their life, rather than consumers and municipalities footing the bill. And public education is very important. Trash disposal has changed a lot, like Susan said, in the last 100 years, in both what we throw away and how we throw it away. And understanding how to properly dispose of trash that we create and learning to view trash as a valuable resource is a big need. So now I'm going to talk about benefits and challenges. So the carbon footprint. When there's less organics that end up in landfills, then less methane is produced, and that is the worst greenhouse gas. When there's more recycling, then there's less need for virgin raw materials to be extracted and processed. For example, the making of aluminum cans, if you make them from recycled materials, you only use 1/12 of the energy than if you made them from raw materials. Less trash, less expense for both individuals and for municipalities. Landfills are slowly filling up. Ours is closed, both of ours are closed, and 3 others in the area are closing in the near future. And currently in Massachusetts, there's a moratorium on building new or expanding any of the existing incinerators in Massachusetts. So waste reduction improves the recycling rate by more materials being diverted out of the landfills, and thus they become available for reuse. It improves our air and water quality by less garbage being incinerated or dumped into our waterways. So those are all good things and benefits, but of course there's some challenges. Many people are used to this one-use, throwaway society and an out-of-sight and out-of-mind mentality when it comes to trash. It can be hard to change that, and most people aren't that interested in talking or thinking about trash. Compliance is another thing, getting people to buy in that every little bit makes a difference. There's also a cost for enforcement, such as household garbage checks or laws for extended producer responsibility. Another challenge is supplying a clean and reliable supply of materials for manufacturers, and they also must be willing to use them. Sometimes there's a misperception that the quality of the recycled materials may not be as good as virgin materials, and that can be thought by both the manufacturers and the consumers. And even with waste reduction and zero waste, you still have a need for trash disposal, because zero waste is considered achieved when you have 90% diversion from the waste stream, but there's still a little bit left over that you have to deal with.
Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Meg Vickery discussing some potential waste-to-energy options.
So I'm going to talk about possibilities of waste-to-energy technologies. These are there's a various assortment of these, but basically they produce electricity and heat from the waste, i.e. our trash. Right now, the technologies available include waste-to-energy combustion, which is what people think of as incineration. There's gasification, which is a relatively new technology and a little more difficult to find examples of. And then there's something called anaerobic digestion, which is basically sort of high-tech composting, which produces you compost the materials, you produce a gas, and you burn the gas to produce electricity. So the benefits of any of these is that you produce electricity and sometimes heat. Waste is generally readily available, unfortunately. In many cases, waste-to-energy facilities increase the recycling rates. You reduce the use of fossil fuels. You're not burning coal to produce your electricity, etc. You reduce the carbon footprint generally if you have a local site waste-to-energy facility. You don't have to truck the waste as far away. And you reduce the waste volume and you lengthen the landfill's life. So there is ash that needs to be disposed of, but that's a lot less volume than what you normally send to a landfill. Some of the challenges, there are emissions, of course, and those are a big concern. Siting issues, again, it's not something anybody wants in their backyard. And you still have to move the trash, haul the trash some distance, but not as far as South Carolina, for example. So the most traditional is the waste to energy, and this is where you capture the energy that's produced from combusting the waste. This is a very popular method in Europe. It's in the new state-of-the-art facilities, which have changed dramatically in the last 10 years or so. These facilities meet very stringent air quality standards, international air quality standards. They produce a lot less climate-changing gas than the same amounts of trash that are put into a landfill because of the issue of methane, which is such a more dangerous gas for climate change. We also have a local waste-to-energy facility in Agawam or Springfield owned by Covanta. The challenges, we have ash left over that needs to be disposed of, and that has to be taken care of very, very carefully. We have an issue of fine particulate matter in the emissions, which is a serious issue. And there are always concerns about emissions such as dioxins and so forth, which have to be very carefully scrubbed out if they can be removed at all. The next slide, if it were here, would show you gasification, which is it's almost like you need power to start it off, but you compress the trash with such intensity that you produce a gas called a syngas, which is then burned to produce electricity. The benefits of this is, again, it produces less methane and than the trash in a landfill, less greenhouse gases, and it does address the issue of non-organic waste. The challenges are, in my research, it's been very hard to find a successful example of this working anywhere in the country. And the third slide is about anaerobic digestion, which, as I said, is basically sort of composting on steroids with a product, not only the digestate, which is what's left over and can be used as fertilizer, but also the gas that's produced when the microorganisms break down the materials. and that can be burned to produce electricity as well. This is a great idea. The only problem is it doesn't address the question of non-organic waste. So you still have this issue of what to do with your waste, with the non-compostable waste. And that's one of the big challenges. You also have small trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide in what's left over in the biogas produced when you burn the biogas. And you have to be careful that the wastewater management is done well so that the water is not polluting the waterways if it gets out. So those are my slides, except they disappeared.
Thank you, Meg.
And I guess now I'll leave it open to you all.
We'll open it up now to questions and answers, comments, ideas, suggestions from members of the audience. And welcome. We're all glad that you came out this evening.
Having presented the situation, we would love to hear what the people of Amherst would like to see happen in the next 5 years for the trash situation.
Yes, Aaron Hayden.
Well, I'm Aaron Hayden. I'm a member of the Select Board and fortunate to be the liaison to the RRMC, and was delighted to hear about this event tonight. I'm very glad it's on. It's one of the issues. Garbage, of course, is an issue that we just wish would go away, and it keeps pressing closer and closer. I had two questions and a comment that I wanted to make. First of all, you mentioned that some of the innovations for reducing waste, and I imagine that's the sort of process where you take something like plastic and turn it back into raw stock. You mentioned that innovations, a lot of stuff that's being worked on out there is not effective at our small scale. What size of regional refuse collection would get us to a scale when that innovation, or those innovations, and maybe some that we don't know about yet, would begin to make sense? And how do we get to that level of organization?
Well, John has been doing a little research on anaerobic digestion, and he might have a sense of what quantity of material would be needed for a technology like that. You, John?
The answers, plural, to your question, I'm sure are many, because what Susan's referring to is that I've been exploring the anaerobic digestion option, which addresses only the organic waste, and it would be a regional opportunity for. I've approached Hampshire College, and they might be interested, and there might be a different site nearby that would take large amounts of household waste, or rather organic waste from your kitchen scraps and that sort of thing, and also large amounts of yard waste, and in equal amounts. I think it's 15,000 tons a year of each, and then you get a lot of energy, you get a lot of compost out of that facility, which is an enclosed facility. So yes, that is a regional. I couldn't tell you how many towns it would serve. And I also don't have an answer to the other questions about the other technologies and what would be required, what scale would be required to make them possible.
The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission has had a group of people who are looking at the composting situation. They were looking at regional composting. There is a facility, New England Organics, I want to say, that is starting an anaerobic digestion facility in Hadley. The plans are to have one in Hadley, and they're going to have animal waste and compost brought to that location. I don't know what quantity it is, but we can certainly look that up and let you know.
Mixed with cow manure, I believe.
Mixed with cow manure. Yeah, that's what I meant by animal waste.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is also convening a group to talk about the solid waste situation because of the landfill closures. So it's a regional issue, and it is being addressed. I don't have numbers for the quantity of material that we would need to make it viable here in Amherst, but I can get them for you.
Well, I didn't expect there to be numbers yet, because I know this is an evolving field. Are we represented to that PVPC
Yes.
refuse group? Okay. The second comment that I wanted to make is that I've been doing research on this on my own, and some of the solutions to the long-term issues, we've got these landfills. What do you do with them? I mean, we can continue to pretend that they're just a green grassy field, but I mean they will have to be dealt with in the future at some point by our great grandchildren. I don't know, but a lot of those solutions that are being actively pursued now, specifically I'm thinking of mining, requires large volumes. Again, that's a regional, the idea of getting a lot of volume together by collecting a lot of towns' old dumps is an idea. Of course, the concern that I have with that is that the Historical Commission might have a problem, because in 1,000 years dumps become archaeological sites.
That was a joke, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, actually, the island of Nantucket has mined their landfills, which is interesting. They have, because they have a limited amount of land to use as landfill, they have gone ahead and mined what they had so far and have pulled out all the recyclable material, and so it can be done.
You mentioned Hampshire College.
Could you identify yourself, please?
My name is Elsie Fetterman.
Hello, Elsie.
I live in Amherst. And I just heard you say something about organic waste and yard waste. I mean, if we had 15,000 tons a year in Hampshire College, I'm not aware. Is another Hampshire College accept some of our waste here?
Yes, the idea would be if Hampshire College decided to locate a facility there, and if the facility decided that it was a good business venture for them, then they would accept household organic waste and yard waste from a large area. It wouldn't be simply for Hampshire College's use.
But this Pioneer Valley Planning Commission,
yes, that's a
has
separate
that regional group. Has anyone talked? In other words, someone at Hampshire College said that if you can guarantee us 15,000 tons a year, we'll take you. Is that what the situation is? Has someone approached Hampshire College and negotiated that if, in fact, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission we could accumulate that in the whole region? In other words, I don't know how far along is that discussion gone with Hampshire College.
I can't tell you where it is right now.
Preliminary discussions have
preliminary,
been
right.
Well, it's very optimistic, I mean, about working together and in the region.
Yes, hi. My name's Dale Houle, and I'm from Shutesbury, and I'm a builder in the area. And I would just like to underline the fact that I've been relying on the Amherst landfill for about 35 years. And it's a critical resource to myself and to other small builders. There are a lot of situations that exist where containers are just not feasible, for a variety of reasons. And to be able to use the Amherst landfill, which I would also like to say is a very well-run operation. I think you should be congratulated on that. You've got a great staff out there who do their best to help people. But the role of the landfill is really part of, I think, a partnership between the town and the commercial interests. And I think it's one of the biggest roles that town government plays in assisting commercial enterprises such as myself. So I would advocate, I think, that any way that we can keep it going in much the manner that it's going now, whether through increased fees or more restrictions, that would be my vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think just to clarify, you called it a landfill, and technically at this point it is a transfer station. So all the material that's taken there is transferred to another facility. I just wanted to clarify that because we had landfill as part of our earlier discussion.
Hello, I'm Todd Tripp, and I am a resident of Amherst, and it's clear to me that we will sooner or later need to consider very fancy technologies and sophisticated ways of dealing with these problems. But of course, the simple solution should always really be pushed on hard before we go to more expensive things. And it seems to me that there is a simple solution which is oddly elusive to us. Here's what it is. My understanding is that Northampton has purchased a large amount of land to expand their current landfill, and yet they're not going forward with it. So my question is, well, okay, so they've decided to not expand their landfill for now, but how much of a final decision is that? I mean, is it really true that we're never going to be able to use Northampton's landfill again, or could, with some negotiation or some increased pressure that might develop in the future, could we consider that as a place that could help us out with at least one of the challenges?
It's my understanding that it's pretty final, but I'm going to ask Guilford in the audience to see if he has any more specific information about that.
Hi, I'm Guilford Mooring. I'm the Superintendent of Public Works. As far as Northampton's concerned, they're closing their landfill and they're shifting. So as far as that city is concerned, they're out of the trash business or trash collection business for themselves. They'll run, I believe, a small transfer stations. They'll keep their transfer stations open, but other than that, they won't go back into the landfill business. So I would, if I was a betting person, I'd say 99% sure that we'll never see another active landfill in Northampton in our lifetime.
I guess I could have asked Guilford this directly, but the transfer station was granted permission from the Zoning Board of Appeals for a certain period of time. And could you tell me when that time is up?
Very soon. It is. It's up very soon.
What does that mean? 2011, 2012,
2012, I believe.
2012?
Thank you very much for joining us this evening. This concludes our presentation about the state of solid waste in Amherst.
We encourage you, we encourage people, if they have, after viewing this, if they have concerns or questions or comments, to forward them to the committee for the Recycling and Refuse Management Committee. You can send them to my attention. My phone number is, well, my email address would be waites@amherstma.gov, and we would welcome all and every suggestion. Thank you.